Main enumeration with Sublist3r. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at how to passively enumerate subdomains, for a specific domain through the use of a really cool open source tool called Sublist3r. So again, I'm going to be performing this on my Kali Linux VM, and we're going to be again exploring or taking a look at the same sites that we've been using thus far. So again, the important thing to note here is we're not performing subdomain brute forcing. So we're not actively engaging with the target. This is not active information gathering. We're essentially using publicly available sources of information like search engines like Google, Bing, Yahoo, etc. to find subdomains that might have been indexed by these search engines. And Sublist3r is a really useful tool that will essentially allow us to do this as efficiently as possible. So I'm going to switch over to my Kali Linux VM. Alright, so I'm back on my Kali Linux VM and I'm currently on the Sublist3r GitHub repository. By the way, all credits go to the author of this really cool tool, Ahmed Abul Ella. A really fantastic tool that I've used for many years. And if you want to learn more about it, I recommend taking a look at the GitHub repository. So as you can see right over here, Sublist3r is a Python tool that's designed to enumerate subdomains of websites using OSINT, which is open source intelligence. That essentially means information that is publicly available, which falls in line with passive information gathering. It helps penetration testers and bug hunters collect and gather subdomains for the domain they are targeting. Sublist3r enumerates subdomains using many search engines such as Google, Yahoo, Bing, Baidu, and Ask. Sublist3r also enumerates subdomains using Netcraft, VirusTotal, ThreatCrowd, DNS Dumpster, which we've used, and Reverse DNS. And Subbrute, which was another script, was integrated with Sublist3r to increase the possibility of finding more subdomains using brute force. So this tool also supports brute force, and we will not be utilizing that functionality because that falls in that essentially falls into the domain of active information gathering, because at that point we'll be actively engaging with the target system, or in this case the target domain. So Sublist3r is already part of the Kali Linux repositories, which means you can install it by typing in the following command. It doesn't come pre-installed, but it's available within the repos. So if I type in sudo apt-get install and Sublist3r, you can see I already have it installed, and the actual syntax or the usage instructions are fairly easy to understand. You can see that you need to specify the domain with the D argument or the D option. You also have the long form if you want to specify that. And then, of course, in our case, we're going to be specifying the search engines. So you might be asking yourself, well, how does this work? How does Sublist3r find subdomains for a particular domain that you're targeting? And I want to firstly point out that, you're not going to get 100% success, because it's going to essentially search or, perform searches on all of these search engines to try and see if there is a subdomain that might have been indexed previously that, could possibly be hidden now, or, might not be active, but it's still accessible through the internet. And this is something that you will be able to do in the next video when we'll be exploring Google Docs. So this is essentially automating that process, but I wanted to cover it before we actually get to that point. So now that we have it installed, you can see that the search engines we can specify are, Google, Baidu, etc. So in this case, let's try it out with Google and Yahoo, because they are the ones, these are the sites or search engines that index, the best. So we can say Sublist3r, domain is hackersploit.org. And in this case, the search engine is going to be Google and Yahoo. Now, one thing to note, this tool makes a lot of requests to Google via your IP address, and Google has a rate limiting functionality that will essentially limit the amount of requests that you can make. So that's why in the previous videos you saw that whenever I open up google.com, it prompted me to essentially enter in a captcha or to verify myself, because I'd passed the threshold of what Google considers legitimate traffic that's being essentially being performed or facilitated by a standard user. With a tool like this, we're sending a ton of requests, so do be cognizant of that. So I'll hit enter, And we're going to give this a couple of seconds. So you can see that Google is now blocking our requests. So in order to bypass this, I am going to switch to a VPN. So I have a third-party VPN service that will allow me to bypass this. In your case, you'll not need to go through this particular process, but we can easily bypass it by saying we want to use Yahoo, for example. So we'll just run it with Yahoo before switching to our to my VPN. As I said, you don't need to do this because this is going to be your first time running it. Again, if you take a look at the usage instructions, it should highlight that. It should actually highlight that. And of course, you have the ability to output your results into a text file, which is something that I would recommend that you do whenever you're performing a penetration test. So let me just activate my VPN and then we can try this out again. All right, so I've enabled my VPN, which means I'm now in another location, but you didn't hear that from me. So we can perform, we can run Sublist again now, and hopefully Google will not block our request. So there we are, it looks like it's working now. So that's one way to bypass that. You can easily get a free access to a free VPN for the purposes of performing enumeration. So this will take a couple of seconds, and in this case you can see we weren't able to find any subdomains. So we can try and add other search engines into our particular search here. So let's see if we can find the actual search engines that we can use here, because I don't think they are highlighted explicitly. There we are. So in this case, it looks like, we don't need to specify. We can simply get rid of the engine option here, and this will run the search on all engines. So there we are. Looks like VirusTotal is probably blocking our request, so that's fine. We should be able to find subdomains for hackersploit.org because I have set up others, and of course we should be able to find the forum subdomain. So again, we'll just let this complete. There might be an issue where you'd need to specify the actual domain, as is, but this should work. So I'm just going to let this complete because it's actually searching, in all. It's going to be searching with all search engines. As you can see in this case, that did not look like it worked. So if we say www.hackersploit.org, will that change anything? Probably not. So for some reason, it looks like we aren't getting any results. So what we can do is we can limit this to maybe a site like DNS Dumpster, and let's see whether that produces any results. As you can see, that doesn't. We were able to identify the subdomain on Netcraft, so let's try and do that now. So I'm going to specify the search engine as Netcraft. Is it still not giving us any results? That's perfectly fine. We can try this maybe on zonetransfer.me, and let's see whether we get any results. If not, it's probably my VPN again. I'll probably need to switch my VPN, and we'll see whether that works again. Because this can be quite tedious of a process, but that's why we'll have the next video where we'll be taking a look at how to, essentially utilize Google Docs or Google hacking to, identify information like this, through publicly available information. So let's see whether we get any results for zonetransfer.me. I really doubt it because we weren't able to enumerate or, identify any subdomains on DNS Dumpster. So in this case, you can see we only found the actual, the actual main domain, which is www.zonetransfer.me, which is really weird because I do know that I had various subdomains for hackersploit.org. What we can do is try and do this for maybe a site like ini.com, and let's see whether we are able to identify subdomains like this. If not, as I said, it might be an issue with my DNS server and the fact that most of these sites are now blocking my requests. So we can also limit the amount of threads we are using to essentially limit the amount of requests we are sending using the T option, which you saw me use previously, but that's really for the brute force attack. And let's see whether we get any subdomains for ini.com, because I know that this tool does indeed work. Just that in certain cases, some of these search engines or sites might be blocking your request. So do keep that in mind. There we are. So for INE, you can see we get all of these subdomains, which you might not have known about. So some of these, I don't know whether I should be showing you, but again, there really isn't any harm in this because these are all publicly available subdomains. You just need to know how to search for them. So as you can see here, we have all of these subdomains, which it's enumerated successfully for ine.com. And that's essentially it with regards to utilizing Sublist3r. As I said, in certain cases, it might not work because, you might have exceeded the amount of requests you're sending. But there you go. So that is how to utilize Sublist3r for subdomain enumeration, more specifically passive subdomain enumeration. And this is going to conclude the practical demonstration side of this video.